What's up, YouTube? Today I'm going to be talking about swords and axes. So first I'll show you what I'm going to use to represent swords and axes. So I have this. It's a Viking bearded axe by Cold Steel. It's kind of somewhere in between a one-handed and two-handed axe. It's kind of short to be a two-handed axe, but it also feels kind of heavy to be a one-handed axe. So then we have the SOG Tomahawk. It's like a throwing axe, but it can be used for other things too. And then a Coleman camp axe that you're probably familiar with. And then I have my saber that's been in previous videos. That's the only sword I have. And for the knives, I'm using this knife by Reaper. This came from my micro survival kit, if you've seen that video. So now I'll tell you kind of what it's all about. So you have, in any kind of SHTF situation, you're probably going to have your rifle, and then your pistol, and then you'll have some kind of backup melee weapon if all else fails. And a lot of people have talked about, what's better, a sword or an axe, but I don't know if anyone's really addressed it in like a bugging out kind of situation. So there's trade-offs with all of these. This axe, first I'll say what's really nice about the axes is I feel like you get some added utility that you don't get from the knives and swords. Something like this, you can pretty easily chop down a small tree with, but then this is also kind of geared to be a fighting axe, so you can chop through an enemy too. And what's also nice about the axes is with a lot of them, they kind of have like a hook like that, so if someone is coming at you with like a sword or a spear or whatever, you can hook it away maybe, and then come and chop them. And because axes do have a lot of weight on the end, I think if someone's using something like a saber, like what I just showed you, you can pretty easily bat that away. It's kind of hard to control it and keep it up. Like, say if someone was coming at me with a big axe, if I was trying to block that, because my hand is so far away from where I'm going to be blocking and there's a lot of force on that axe head, it would be really easy to just knock that out of the way and then come in to finish them off. But the swords do have some utility too. Now the swords aren't going to be as good for chopping trees and doing that kind of thing, so they're not going to be very good bushcraft items, but I think a lot of swords are kind of have a bit of an advantage going off against the axes, because one, there's all different kinds of swords. So like you could be using a two-handed sword or like an arming sword or something a little bit different. The saber is kind of like one of the most light swords, so it's going to have the hardest time going up against an axe. But also something like this is much quicker, and you can do some things with it you can't do with the axe. So the axe really can only chop. Of course you could, kind of hit someone with it like that, but that's not very effective. Or you could, hit them on the side, but that's not very effective either. With a sword, you can cut from any direction really easily, as well as stabbing, which you can't really do with the axe. And another thing is, with a sword, the blade is only a few inches long, or I'm sorry, with the axe, the blade is only a few inches long. With a sword, the whole thing is the blade. So if you miss and you hit someone with the axe on the handle, one, it's not really going to do anything, and also you stand the chance of them either taking control of it by grabbing the handle or having the handle split. So say if you were trying to block with the axe and someone came down hard with something else, maybe another axe, maybe a sword or whatever, a hammer, they might be able to break it. With a sword, that's less likely because it's all metal. So if someone swings down, block it. That's where I think the sword has some advantage. And I think a sword, if you're just worried about it being a weapon and not having any other utility, a sword might be the better way to go. But then again, the axe does give a lot more utility. And similar things can be said for the smaller axes and the knives. The knives, you know, for a lot of history, riflemen, their backup weapon, their melee weapon, has been a tomahawk or a knife. I think here the tomahawk kind of has the advantage. And a lot of times these bladed weapons for riflemen, they'll be, you know, what you use for bushcraft things as well whenever you're out in the field. If you're going to be out there for a long time, they'll use it to chop things, which this knife can chop very easily, and cut and, you know, do all the stuff around the camp. But then, you know, if it gets into like a close combat situation and they need to use it, they got to be able to fight with it too. And I think in this case, going up against a knife versus a tomahawk, the tomahawk has the advantage, and it can hook just like the other axe can. And it's also, one like this is made to be thrown, which you probably wouldn't want to do, but it's nice to have the option. And then I also feel like, because just the way you use a knife and how much longer the tomahawk is, it'd be easier to get in close and, you know, chop their fingers or whatnot. But also, like with the tomahawk, you can only really chop. With the knife, you can stab and slash and cut. The tomahawk can't even really cut so well. You can't draw it across someone. It has to be a chop. So there's trade-offs there too. But I would most likely take the tomahawk. And I think this is an excellent camp tool as well. Usually if I am camping, I'll have a small knife, like either a pocket knife or my Mora on me, just like on my belt, but then I'll also have the tomahawk. And for most situations, I find myself going towards the tomahawk because, you know, you can chop anywhere from small branches up to, you know, decent size trees, whereas you can't chop as well with this. And then, you know, at the same time, you can do some kinds of cutting and whittling with it. And I just find this to be a better weapon as well. There was one time when I was camping and I saw a copperhead snake crawling into my tent, and my brother got a stick and pulled it out, and it slithered down into this hole that was right across from my tent, and we didn't want it in there. So I found myself going towards my tomahawk for that purpose. And another thing you could do with this, which I used in this case, is I use the back spike, which not all of them have a back spike, but this one does, to kind of dig it out, dig the snake out of the hole, and then chop it, and then just chopped it straight through. The knife wouldn't have suited that purpose as well, because for one, you can't really dig with it, at least not without messing up the blade. And then it would have been hard to get in there and chop it because the hole was only so big, but the tomahawk had no problem getting in there and chopping. Yeah, so I think the axe, if you have to choose between a knife or a tomahawk on your belt, I would go with the tomahawk. And then lastly is the camp axe, which isn't really made to be a fighting implement in any way, whereas all the others were to some extent. But again, it's still, if this is what you have, and these are cheap, this is a cheap axe, probably like a $10 axe. Still can be used that way, of course. And ones like this, I feel will even have added utility because it has a very heavy head on it. So you can use this back part as a hammer, and that's why I do keep this in my pack, even though I have my other axes, is because I need something that can be a hammer to hammer in tent pegs and all that sort of deal. But it has a lot of weight behind it too. So if you did have to chop someone with this, it's probably going to go in pretty deep and do a lot of damage because it has so much weight behind it. I'd say the head of this is even heavier than the head of this axe. And this axe is made to be more lightweight, so you can swing it around easily. And you know, if someone's coming at you with a small, agile weapon, you can kind of get it out of the way more easily. If that had a heavy head, it'd be harder to maneuver like that. But this being made just for chopping down trees and things, that isn't really taken into consideration. So it's going to do more damage, but it's a little harder to wield than something of a similar size like the tomahawk. And this also does give you some options if you want to maybe not chop someone, but just hit them and maybe knock them out or whatever. You can hit them with the back of it, and that would definitely do the trick. It'd be like hitting someone with a hammer. And then you can also do like hooking and things to some extent. Maybe not quite as well as with the others because it doesn't have much of a beard on it, but you could. So I wouldn't really necessarily have this as my backup over any of the others, like on my belt or anything, but if you did have it, if that's all you got, I don't think it'd be too bad. And this could probably be thrown as well. If you ever go to any of those like axe throwing bars, they have a lot of them in my area. They use axes like this for throwing. Usually they're a little bit bigger, but they're kind of the same style. And some of them do even use them this size, so they can definitely be thrown. But yeah, just something to consider in your loadout. So, you know, I think I'll probably find myself, I do keep this now that I have this on my pack externally, and I think it's just really nice to have a large axe in your pack that you can use for, you know, really getting in there and chopping down some trees with a lot of force, but then also having something that you could fight with, and it's almost, you could almost consider it a pole arm. Maybe not necessarily one this length, but you know, another thing I didn't mention about this is you can use it to kind of keep people back, you know. You can keep some distance between you and whatever you're fighting, keep it off. And to some extent with a sword too, but I don't carry my sword in my pack because it doesn't give you that utility of being able to chop and do all those sort of things. Yeah, so that's why I kind of have the axe usually on the back of my pack, and this usually on my side, and then a knife too. So that's what I find to be the most useful, but you might find something else, but it's something to consider. And there you have it. Have a good day.